This is CGTN, China Global Television Network.
Shops close and streets remain empty across Sudan's capital Khartoum on the first day of a general strike. The presidents of Eritrea and Egypt meet in Cairo amid conflicts in Libya and Sudan. And flash floods cause death, destruction and displacement in Uganda's capital, Kampala. Hello and a warm welcome to Africa Live on CGTN. I'm Lindy Mtongana in Nairobi. Also coming up this half hour. G20 leaders express concern over trade tensions and geopolitical conflicts. And in sports, Portugal and Netherlands face off in the UEFA Nations League final. Well, in your top story, shops have closed and streets are empty across Sudan's capital, Khartoum, on the first day of a general strike in Sudan. The civil disobedience campaign is the latest measure in a push for civilian rule. Protests have been ongoing since former President Omar al-Bashir was ousted in April. Earlier this week, security forces stormed a protest camp in an escalation that is believed to have left at least 60 people dead. They also arrested 2 rebel leaders on Saturday. Some citizens are calling on the youth to remove barricades from the streets for the sake of peace, while others want the general strike to go on.
The Sudanese people had a big role to play in order for the civil disobedience to be executed in the correct way, and on its first day, I think that it has been 300% successful.
We are calling upon the youth to remove the barricades and the streets be opened, so we will be able to live in peace. Then we'll rebuild Sudan.
Now, over the past few months, the crisis in Sudan has led to bloodshed and protests. But how did it all begin? Let's take a look back.
It all started in April, when demonstrators launched a sit-in protest in front of the military headquarters in the capital, Khartoum. They wanted longtime President Omar al-Bashir to step down. Bashir was ousted by the army a few days later, but the protest continued. Demonstrators demanding the military to hand over power to a civilian government. Then, talks between the ruling military council and protest leaders began, but despite some breakthroughs, they all collapsed in late May. Thousands of workers went on strike across the country to put pressure on the military. Earlier this week, security forces broke up the sit-in protest. Tensions rose and led to clashes. According to the Sudanese government, the fighting has left over 60 dead. On June 5th, the army offered talks without preconditions, but the opposition turned them down. As the standoff continues, the African Union urges foreign actors to stay away from it. But one question remains. When will the political crisis come to an end?
Eritrean President Isaias Afwerki has concluded a one-day state visit to the Egyptian capital, Cairo. He met President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi as well as other senior officials. Afwerki agreed to bolster political and economic ties with Cairo. The 2 leaders also vowed to cooperate on maintaining peace and security in the Horn of Africa region. Our correspondent in Cairo, Adel Al-Mahrawi, has more.
This is President Isaias Afwerki's 3rd official visit to Cairo since President el-Sisi took office. On Saturday, the 2 leaders discussed cooperation in regional political conflicts, on top of which Sudan. Red Sea security is the most vital area of coordination between the 2 nations.
The Red Sea security in the main strategic file is a concern to both nations. Eritrea lies on the southern gates of the Suez Canal. There are concerns that Yemeni Houthi rebels control over Bab al-Mandab Strait. El-Sisi is very interested in securing this region and maintain that piracy does not grow in that area again.
Egypt is the 2nd largest trade partner to Eritrea right after China. Trade volume between the two nations is estimated at around $98 million.
The volume of trade between the two countries does not reflect their deep ties. There have been numerous meetings between the Egyptian and Eritrean officials in the recent years to boost these relations. Egypt has been seeking to take lead in the telecommunications infrastructure in Eritrea, to create agricultural projects, fish farms, and make its construction arm Arab contractors build some 3,000 houses.
El-Sisi and Afwerki agreed on developing cooperation projects between the two sides in various sectors. Cairo is also seeking to intensify technical support programs offered to Eritrea through the Egyptian Agency of Partnership for Development. President Afwerki has commended Egypt's role in supporting Eritrea since its independence and until the recent efforts to lift the UN sanctions imposed over his country. To Egypt, Eritrea is an essential Nile-basin country, which support is definitely needed as Cairo moves to secure its water share. Adil Mahroui, CGTN, Cairo.
Meanwhile, in Egypt, a number of lawmakers are drafting a new law that will censor non-licensed clerics from posting fatwas and other religious decrees online. It's part of plans to curb extremism on social media. Here's Yasser Hakim with more.
Ayman Shusha is living in the United Arab Emirates. He posted several messages on Facebook hailing Wednesday's terrorist attack on security checkpoint that killed 8 soldiers in northern Sinai, Egypt. He was arrested by UAE authorities to be extradited to Egypt. This has raised the issue of combating extremism online.
Egypt has taken several steps to face extremism, such as making a list of the only clerics who are allowed to preach online. There is also a centralized preaching code to prevent deviations from the moderate Islam. A new law has also given powers to authorities to investigate, detain, and try those accused of electronic crimes or spreading of extremism.
A number of parliamentarians are drafting a resolution to ban extremist clerics online. However, it might not be easy to implement.
The sheikh preaching without license is like someone doing a medical operation without being a doctor. It's against the law and should be controlled and severely punished. The reason for the extremism and hatred we face is because of the lack of control or supervision over who preaches religion in the media and social media. It needs strong implementation.
Besides the military war on terrorism, there is a crackdown on extremist thinking. But some experts believe more needs to be done.
The Arab Quartet of Egypt, Saudi Arabia, the UAE and Bahrain have all agreed for collective action to face extremism online, and they share information and hand over anyone who incites hatred or violence in each country. It's a good example of how this draft law can work, but it will be useless if other countries are not cooperating, because most of the extremist websites are established abroad. So you need to track them abroad, which can only work if other countries are active as well.
Penalties have become more stringent according to a new law passed in 2017. Inciting violence, hatred, or terrorism online could be punishable by 5 years to life imprisonment and could lead to the death penalty if the post has led to an actual crime. Yes, Hakim for CGTN, Cairo.
Torrential rains have affected several parts of Uganda's capital, Kampala. Several roads have been cut off and at least 8 people have died in flash floods. Our correspondent Leon Senyange visited an area where property was damaged by floodwaters after Saturday's heavy downpour.
I'm in Kame Valley, one of the major outlets of water from Mukono. This place is about 25 kilometers out of the capital, Kampala. Now, in Kame Valley, the biggest channel that there is this one right here. It was overflooded by Saturday afternoon's heavy downpour. Most of the water that flows through this particular area comes right up from the hills in Mukono, further to my left. The heavy downpour definitely caused some major destructions here, sweeping several of the crops and flowing right into the households of several of the people. One of the major issues here was the amount of water that should have been taken away by the channel. The channel to my right has only recently been constructed. It is a new road as well, and several of the residents expected that it would cause an easy flow of the water. Unfortunately, that didn't happen. Most of the water, we are being told, was crossing over onto the other side of the road, and both sides of the road were entirely over flooded. There was definitely a big concern for those that work in this particular area. The major activity here is car washing. We have been told 3 cars were swept by the flooding waters that came through. One of the gentlemen who was working here was stuck in the car. He, however, was rescued. And to give us a little bit more of what exactly happened is Mukwasi Julius. Mukwasi, tell me, you have had issues of flooding here. Has there been any solution?
We have had issues of flooding here, but actually there have been no any solution here. There has been actually nothing. There has been nothing to assist us.
You tell me the mayor here had promised that he would have this thing solved.
Yeah, the mayor came here when he was looking for pools. He came here and promised us that he's going to rescue us in each and everything. Even to make matters worse, yesterday the mayor passed there himself, but he just passed when the patrol vehicle was there. He never even stopped to see what has actually happened to the scene. He went, and after going where he was going, later on he came and went, but he never even came to the scene to see actually what happened.
Well, thank you very much, Julius. A very big concern there, not only for Julius, but I believe also for the residents around here. Now, Kame Valley is not the only place that has been affected by the heavy downpour in recent weeks around the capital, Kampala. Several places have left about 500 people homeless because, of course, the water goes into their homesteads and they have nowhere to stay. Several of the businesses have been lost and, well, those that have small farms around have been destroyed. The Uganda Red Cross, however, tells us that they're pulling out a few sensitization campaigns to ensure that people are more knowledgeable about the effects of this kind of floods, about the effects of any diseases that may come as a result of the stagnated water and the overflowing water around. And as it seems, the rain is not just about to stop. Leon Sanyange, CGTN, Mukono, Central Uganda.
Well, time now for a short break. Here's what's still ahead on the program. The UN says the ineffective administration of financial policies is hampering progress on the SDGs in Africa. And the curtain closes on a colourful Dakar Fashion Week with some designs set to feature on the next issue of Vogue Spain.
Economic data out of the country. The country's foreign currency reserves.
With a dedicated and diverse team of anchors, CGTN now brings Africa to the palm of your hand.
I'm Penina Karibe in the heart of Nairobi, which is bustling.
From everyday heroes to the continent's most powerful figures, we bring their voices to you.
We haven't changed. And this is something most of us are very excited about.
We bring you news that's changing perspectives. News that brings Africa to the world. CGTN. See the difference. Africa Live. Find your voice.
Finance ministers from the world's leading economies issued a warning about global growth. G20 ministers gathered in Japan say global growth appears to be stabilizing but remains low, especially with increasing trade tensions and geopolitical conflicts. They noted that global imbalances have narrowed but remain large and persistent. For the first time, the G20 tackled the issue of aging as a potential risk to growth. The group urged countries to encourage more women and the elderly to join the labour market. Meanwhile, ministers also promised to work to create a fair international tax system. They also highlighted the benefits of technological innovations but warned of risks.
We reaffirm that we shall use all policy tools to support strong, sustainable and balanced and inclusive growth. We also reaffirm our leaders' conclusion on trade at the Buenos Aires summit.
And the G20 finance leaders also agreed to draft rules by 2020 to close tax loopholes used by tech giants such as Facebook and Google. It could, in effect, lead to higher taxes for large global firms. Now, Brazil has indicated it will not block Chinese telecom company Huawei from participating in the country's planned 5G network. Vice President Hamilton Mourão confirmed that U.S. President Donald Trump asked Brazilian President Jair Bolsonaro to reject Huawei technology. But Mourão said Brazilian authorities have no distrust of Huawei and want to take advantage of the innovation the company has to offer. The United Nations Economic Commission on Africa released its annual report on African economies. The report underscores the ineffective administration of fiscal policy in Africa as a barrier to progress in achieving the Sustainable Development Goals. In addition, the economic report outlined the need for long-term diversified trends in resource mobilization for sustained development.
The launch of the Economic Report on Africa 2019 focused on the fiscal policy for financing sustainable development. UNECA highlighted the need for mobilization of domestic revenue as a way forward to get financing for SDGs.
We know that external funding remains important, but African countries have to rely increasingly on domestic sources of finance in order to finance the Sustainable Development Goals. In particular, in our estimates, there is financing gap of 11% of GDP, gross national product, for African countries to meet the Sustainable Development Goals.
The tax to GDP ratio in Africa stands at 15.4%, which is low compared to the international level, which is about 30%. The report suggested African countries need to increase their domestic revenue by creating platforms for taxation of untouched sectors such as the digital economy or online businesses, agriculture, the natural sector, and taxing the government itself. The report also advised governments to bridge the gap between their earnings and expenditure that led to the heavy debt burden.
Despite the fiscal reforms that implemented by many African countries between 2000 up to now, they have failed really to achieve their objectives. The increase between what you earn, your revenues and your expenditure, is really very dangerous. Because what the African did, they started to accumulate debts in order to fill this gap. And that's why now we started really to see alarming signals when we look at the external debt levels in Africa.
The introduction of digitalization of taxation or e-taxation has been highlighted in the report to help African governments' revenue increase by up to 6%. The report also applauded Rwanda, South Africa and Kenya for using digital systems in their taxation process that led to an increase in their annual revenue by up to 20%.
Governments from all over the world made commitments during the third International Conference on Financing Development here in Addis Ababa through Addis Ababa Action Agenda on Financing Development to really support African countries, especially low-income countries, to enhance their capacity to mobilize domestic resources. And this is where external support should focus on. It should focus on leveraging the capacity of African countries to mobilize and better use more of available domestic resources.
According to UNECA's report, Africa's economy grew by 3.2% in 2018, down slightly from 3.4% in 2017. The continent's growth is expected to pick up to 3.4% in 2019. However, this growth rate is not sufficient to achieve Africa's ambition of eradicating poverty by 2030. Achieving SDGs needs a 7 to 8% annual growth for the continent to realize this goal. Beryl Oro, CGTN.
And let's go to Senegal now, where the 17th edition of Dakar Fashion Week took place this week. The 5-day event showcased designs from 28 participants, including Congolese designer Lupita Swaga and her Afro-futuristic collection. Spanish actress Rosy de Palma was among the audience members. De Palma was given 8 pages in the next issue of Vogue Spain to talk about the Fashion Week. She says she'll do her best to showcase African talent to European audiences.
There will be space for everyone. Everyone deserves a spot, and we will do our best to make sure that everyone is acknowledged. The important thing is to put focus on this Fashion Week so that people living in Europe can see that the Fashion Week makes a huge significance to the people in the continent.
I'm so happy because the more I move forward, it's almost like a victory to me. At the beginning, between 2012 to 2013, people thought I was an extraterrestrial. Now it still shocks them how far I've come. They are almost pleasantly surprised.
And coming up in your sports news, up next. Portugal and Netherlands face off in the UEFA Nations League final.
Africa, where champions are made, records are broken, legends are born. We're there for every goal, for every knockout, for every step of the way. Match Point, only on CGTN.